Thank you for listening to the Clive Barker Podcast. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can get our episodes every Sunday. In episode 280, Jose and Ryan break down the Clive Barker news and give our spoiler-free impressions of the new Hulu Books of Blood. Have you seen it yet? What do you think? This episode is sponsored by Dark Regions Press, a publisher and seller of books by Clive Barker and many other authors. Check out the Clive Barker Mystery Box Wave 2. Just only came out last month. The Clive Barker Mystery Box Wave 2 contains one Clive Barker trade hardcover, one Clive Barker paperback, two Clive Barker ebooks, one Clive Barker movie on DVD or Blu-ray, one Hellraiser movie poster, one Clive Barker surprise item, two Dark Regions Press bookmarks, a $10 Dark Regions Press gift certificate, and these are limited to 2 per household. I thought we said Clive Barker a lot, but that's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what people get on those. Well, welcome. This is episode 280 of the Clive Barker Podcast. Good morning, Jose.
Hey, good morning, Ryan. What's up?
Hey, I just realized I said good morning, but it's afternoon for you.
It is. It's a little past noon for me, which is great. I don't have to wake up too early. For you in Alaska, though, it's a little early.
Yeah. Yep, I woke up at 5 this morning working on a video project that we'll probably be talking about here in a bit.
Nice.
Yeah. But, well, the main thrust of this episode, we're going to be talking about our impressions of the Hulu Books of Blood. But before we get to that, we can talk about some news that's come up. Yeah. Yeah.
So here's some news from the Reef. Yeah, so it seems like Clive has announced to comingsoon.net an exclusive announcement that Godzilla's Michael Dougherty to direct Nightbreed TV series. And I think we've mentioned something about this before on the podcast, at least about Michael Dougherty being connected to the Hellraiser TV show that was being developed for HBO. But now it seems that Morgan Creek's James G. Robinson, David Robinson, and Barbara Wall are going to be executive producing the series for Nightbreed. And Michael Dougherty is going to direct it. So they've been Morgan Creek has been trying to get their intellectual properties developed as TV shows or movies, and like Dead Ringers or Young Guns or Nightbreed. And this is one of those projects that is finally coming to fruition, apparently.
Well, but the last we'd heard it was with Sci-Fi, and I wonder if that's still the case, or if this is where is this going to end up?
Right. So I'm not sure. It says here that Barker confirmed this with Coming Soon, that he is currently writing the Bible for the world of the Nightbreed, and that he's excited to be working with the Godzilla King of Monsters director on the project. And Michael Dougherty is a writer and executive producer of the Hellraiser TV show with HBO. But you're probably right. I'm not sure exactly what platform this is. Let me see if I can find more stuff about this. But yeah, what do you think about it, Ryan?
Oh, yeah, I think it would be great. I'd love to see Nightbreed come out as a TV series and Hellraiser as sort of an anthology TV series. Those would both be great.
I think you're right. I've just confirmed this with a Den of Geek article that said here that they're picking up this news about the Nightbreed TV show, and it says, originally announced back in 2018 for Sci-Fi, the series will presumably focus, like the movie, on Midian, an underground world where outcast creatures and human monster hybrids attempt to live in peace out of the sight of the world above. So it seems
focus
like
on Midian. That's a little strange. If Midian's gone, I don't know. What time period this is going to be set in.
That's true. That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe it'll just be kind of episodic and just, I don't know. It could go back and forward for all we know.
Well, and since it's recast, it might start from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Well, Clive did some insight here for the Den of Geek article. He says, while he enjoys being involved in movies and TV series that are being developed from his material, Barker added he feels most at home on the page. And he says, the idea of doing Deep Hill, which is the novel, and then following it with whichever order they go in, Fear Eternal, which is the collection of short stories. There are a lot of short stories, he says. I've always been a fan of Stephen King's The Mist. I wanted to do something at that length. So I've done something called Mercy and the Jackal, which is a novella that's about that length. So that's cool that he, in this article about Nightbreed, he's actually giving a little update about what he's working on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested in knowing where the Nightbreed can go from here.
Me too.
How they would do it, if it was going to be like a Nightbreed Monster of the Week kind of thing, if it's going to be, let's go back to the original story and try to start with that and adapt that into a TV show. I mean, I think that would be useless, but what do I know? Or if it takes place, like you said, before, when Median was still around, like let's go back into the past, show people bell-bottom pants and stuff, and get some like rockin' tunes coming in, and then show the Nightbreed like driving an old Cadillac or a Chevy. Yeah. So I don't know what they're thinking about, but it's Michael Dougherty that's going to direct it. It's going to be produced by Morgan Creek, and Clive Barker's been working with Michael Dougherty, so that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking for. I really liked Godzilla King of the Monsters, so I'm excited about that, and Hellraiser. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and if it's going to be on Sci-Fi, that's going to be on cable, so it's going to hit a lot of mainstream audiences.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the next thing, we just wanted to kind of congratulate Nicholas Vince. He's started up. He used to have Chattering with Nicholas Vince on his YouTube channel, and now we've got the Chattering Hour, and he's released his first episode with Malcolm McDowell as his first guest. Yeah,
he's got another one already out.
Yeah, he's come a long way since having us on his YouTube channel.
Yes, and we having him on our podcast in like the 5th episode or something like that. So it seems like you can get this on Apple Podcasts. It's under Chris Rowe Management, and we have a link for it in the show notes.
Is it a podcast also? It's not just a YouTube then?
No, it's also on you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts.
Well then, in that case, I'm going to add it. I was just going to give him a hard time saying, hey, this should also be a podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But now I don't need to.
And yes, like you said, it's also on YouTube, and there is at least 2 episodes up. One of them is the Chattering Hour with Malcolm McDowell, and the Chattering Hour with Kathleen Kinmont. So there's two episodes already up. Nicholas Vince spends an hour on his weekly show discussing all topics within the horror thriller genre with special guests, and it is presented by Chris Rowe Management and Tea Time Productions. So Chris Rowe is representing people like Nick, Vince, Barbie Wilde, Clive Barker, and Malcolm McDowell, and I'm guessing a lot of the guests that Nicholas Vince is going to have on.
Yeah, so cool. I'm going to be listening to that.
It's about a 1-hour episode for each one of these. One of them goes at 77 minutes with Malcolm McDowell. I'm sure they're going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of audio, even though we've been doing this for 9 years, the transitions are not getting any better. But Mick Garris, his book A Life in the Cinema, has an audiobook version now that's got a Clive Barker cover on it, and some really cool, and a lot of his recurring cast members that he uses in his movies are reading different parts of the book.
Oh, that's wonderful. A Life in the Cinema is a book that came out many, many years ago. And there was like a super like autographed version that I always wanted to get, but it was too expensive for me. And then it got sold out. But now you can get it as an audiobook. That's really good. Let's see. It's being published by Encyclopocalypse, which is the new hot audiobook company out there putting all these like awesome audiobooks out. And the original book came out in November 1st, 2000. So it's been 20 years.
Wow.
It's about time it got an audiobook.
2000 was 20 years ago.
Yeah, actually, as we're talking, I'm buying it on Audible for 1 credit.
Oh, yeah.
So that's cool. It says introduction by Stephen King, afterword by Toby Hooper, cover art by Clive Barker. For this special audio version, the introduction and afterword are by Joe R. Lansdale, and the stories are read by Garris mainstays, Matt Freuer, Miguel Ferrer, Steven Weber, and the author himself.
Yeah, Max Headroom is in there.
Yes, yeah, and Miguel Ferrer. So I just got it for a credit on Audible. I'm going to listen to it, and I'll probably bring some impressions next episode.
I'm adding it on mine also. But I think for me, the next thing I'm going to be listening to is Pete Atkins' Morningstar book.
Yes. And speaking of Pete Atkins, this is how you do a segue, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, I got better that time.
Yeah. It seems like the Rolling Darkness Revue has a YouTube channel, and it's an underestimated little jewel on YouTube because it started around March of this year, just as the pandemic lockdown started. Peter Atkins of Hellraiser 1, 2, 3, and 4, of Wishmaster, of Morningstar. And speaking of Pete Atkins, see, Ryan, this is how you do a segue.
Yeah, actually, that was my segue. I did that on purpose.
Right. So speaking of that, the Rolling Darkness Revue, I stole your segue, sue me, is on YouTube. And it seems like it's a very underappreciated little jewel on YouTube because around the March, which was the time that the pandemic lockdown started, it seems like Peter Atkins and Glen Hirschberg of the Rolling Darkness Revue, they started reading some of the stories from their published books. And they've been reading them on camera or just audio versions of it. And we're going to put a link to the show notes, a link in the show notes for this YouTube channel. And they already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12. They have about 14 videos up. And they've been reading stories from the little chapbooks that they've published of their stories that are being released by Earthling Publications, edited by Paul Miller. And it's a delight to listen to these audio stories read by Peter Atkins or Glen Hirschberg. They start off by downing a shot of vodka, and they just start telling the story. And it's great. It's great stuff. And we need to signal boost this channel because some of the videos seem to have very few views and incomprehensibly. I'm looking at some that have maybe single-digit views. And we really want people to go in and show Pete some love because he's got some great stories. He, of course, worked on scripts from Hellraiser up until Hellraiser 4. He worked in Nightbreed. He worked in Wishmaster, if you like that franchise, at least the first one.
And he's a prolific author.
And he's a prolific author, yes.
Yeah.
Morningstar, that came out from Encyclopocalypse, is an old book that he published way back when, the 90s. And now he has an audio version read by Doug Bradley that we're listening to. And this is a delight. So go check out this YouTube channel. It's the Rolling Darkness Revue. They started out around, I think, 2004, maybe. Let's see. And they play Artie and Algie, which, if you know the reference, is Arthur Mack and Algernon Blackwood. So they put on these hats and suspenders, and they call each other Artie and Algie. And then they do a kind of a review anthology show. I think it's mostly happened around California, but I think they've been to other places as well.
Well, it'll be good to be able to, for us, those of us that don't live in California, now we can see that kind of content on their YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's amazing. So go check it out. Check the link for the YouTube channel in our show notes and show Pete and Glenn some love.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, kind of leading into our discussion about the Hulu Books of Blood, Clive Barker has been doing a whole bunch of interviews, and I've read through some of these and watched, there was one on the fan club, which is this, it was like a YouTube video of a chat, like a Zoom chat. There was comicbook.com, Den of Geek, Looper, Media Mics, and so all of those, the gist of what I got out of all of those from reading through them and watching the video is that Brannon Braga kind of modeled the movie after Pulp Fiction, and that he's excited to adapt a couple of other Clive's a couple of Books of Blood stories. He was excited about In the Hills, the Cities, and Pig Blood Blues. So for the future, I guess, right? Future sequels. Another part of this is that Clive is going to be doing an AMA and Ask Me Anything on Reddit, talking about presumably his career and Books of Blood and upcoming projects and stuff like that.
But yeah, so Clive has been using his Twitter a little more often, and he did announce that on his Twitter. Let me just bring that up real quick. He said, where is Clive Barker's Twitter?
I put a link to it on the discussion part there.
He says, hey guys, I'm going to be doing an AMA, Ask Me Anything, with Hulu in the subreddit R Horror at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time on Monday, 10/12. Looking forward to your questions. And then he posted a picture of an awesome picture of his work table with all these drawings and a bloody knife. And it says Reddit, Ask Me Anything in R Horror.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, October 12th. So signed by Clive Barker. That's a great announcement there.
Yeah.
And Ryan, you were kind of like a moderator of the Clive Barker subreddit. So you
no. Well, I tried to be. They turned me down because I didn't have enough. I didn't have enough karma points. So this other person I've been talking to, he recommended that I try that, and it didn't work. So now he's become the moderator. Because the people that were running the Clive Barker subreddit, one guy got kicked off like 7 years ago, and the other one hasn't made a post in like 9 years.
Yeah, so I think you can apply to take over a subreddit if the original creator or moderator of the subreddit disappears.
Yeah, and so he did that, and it took them like 2 months, but just yesterday they finally approved him. And he says he asked if it was okay to put a Clive Barker podcast banner along the side. I'm like, yeah, totally.
That's wonderful. So now we have a direct line to that.
Yeah. So, the Clive Barker subreddit, our Clive Barker is going to be, getting a little more interesting.
Excellent. So we should let them know. I'm sure they probably know, but let's send them a message.
Somebody posted a link to this story on there about the AMA. But
awesome.
Yeah. So Reddit, I'm excited to go to see that when he does the AMA.
In one of the interviews that Clive did with Brannon Braga on YouTube, I think this one was, I don't want to misspell her name, but I think it was Karen Maldonado or Kristen Maldonado.
That's the fan club one, right?
The fan club one, yeah. She asked Clive this question, which is they wanted to find out a little bit more about where the idea for the Books of Blood came from originally.
Yeah.
And he said, well, the idea of doing a collection of short stories in which no two stories resemble any other story, in other words, they're all fresh, hopefully fresh ideas, certainly fresh to me, and that none of them would be alike was something I had in my head for a long time. I guess it's one of the strengths of short story collections is that you can keep surprising people like that every time. So it says, I don't know, something like 30 stories and 6 books of blood. If you open it at any page, it's going to be different from any other page in a significant way. Some of the stories are sexy. Some of the stories are very, very bloody. Some of the stories that are just twisted. Some of the stories didn't even have a few jokes in them. But the whole point is that it should always be surprising you. It would always be fresh. And then she went to ask Brannon what it was about this collection of books that made him want to adapt them. And how did they choose the ones that they wanted to focus on? And, well, basically, they just focused on the Book of Blood story and the postscript.
And a news story.
Yeah. And he says, I'm just a fan of Clive's, and I'm a fan, first and foremost, of his work, fan of him as a person. And these books blew my mind when they came out. He was a guy who released 6 volumes of stories, like the Beatles releasing their albums on the same day. Yeah. So he was very impressed about that, and he thought, someone someday is going to do an anthological piece based on the Books of Blood. And as an anthology TV, thanks to Black Mirror, the brilliant Black Mirror started to emerge. It became clear that there was a place for this anthology idea, possibly. Yeah. And I was introduced to Clive, and Clive, thank goodness, was willing to consider the possibility, and we started working together in earnest. And how we chose the stories, well, the Book of Blood, the first story in the first volume, had to be in there because it's the origin story of the Book of Blood. And Clive had other ideas too. I mean, imagine as a fan sitting one-on-one with Clive Barker, and he says, oh, there's some stories that you haven't heard of that I have. That was fun for me because there have been over the years these stories accruing in my head, and I really had nobody to tell them to. And along comes Brandon, and I say to Brandon, hey, I've got some, this is Clive Barker talking now, other stories. Maybe we should be thinking about those too. And he said, bring them on.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that the new story that shows up in this anthology probably started out as a Clive suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that'll kind of dovetail us right into the discussion. So I watched this on it came out on the 7th, and
Yeah.
I watched it that night. There were some other people that watched it like the midnight. Yeah, I couldn't do that. I had work in the morning, so I waited and tried to avoid spoilers and people talking about it. But yeah, my first thought watching it was like, wow, this is so totally new that we don't, we can't feel comforted by knowing what's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Watching that at the beginning, I was just feeling like, man, I have no idea where this is going to go. And even the Book of Blood part is different. It's pretty different from the Book of Blood movie and its original short story. It's kind of truncated.
Yes. So since we haven't spoken anything about this before this call,
yeah,
I just want to say, are we doing this spoiler free right now?
Yeah, I think we should do it. We should try our best to do it spoiler free so people still can, listen. Okay. We've got a lot of listeners in England, and they don't even have a way to watch this movie yet.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll try to do some stuff as spoiler free as possible, so people don't be like, oh, I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. But so yeah, I mean, the beauty of a platform like Hulu is that it's not like being broadcast on TV, so it's not going to be like, oh, I missed it, I have to record it or something. You can watch it anytime. So I did watch it last night. I didn't watch it on the day that it came out, but I watched it last night. I, came upstairs on my bedroom. I put on my mood lights on. I turned off the lights, all the lamps in the bedroom, and I just went on the Hulu trial, and I actually went for the bundle. So I got the bundle of Hulu, Disney Plus, and ESPN Plus.
Oh, okay.
So I signed up for that, and there's no trial for that. It actually just charges you $12 or $13 or whatever. So I went for that because, you know what? Christmas is coming, and it's nice to have Disney Plus. And even if I want to have it just for a couple of months or something and then cancel it, that's fine. We'll see how that goes.
I've been watching an episode of The Simpsons on Disney Plus every day for a few months.
Oh wow!
Yeah. I'm starting it back at the beginning, and because I quit watching it around like season 17 or whenever the DVDs stopped coming out.
Okay, that's not too bad.
But now they've got like 30 seasons or 31 or something like that.
I guess I'll talk to you again in like 4 years and see where you are at.
Yeah.
There's just so many.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Books of Blood. First of all, it's impossible to start talking about this without mentioning when we first heard about this idea that it was coming out, right? So the news that this show was going to be produced, they first broke in July of 2018. At the time, we weren't even sure if this was actually a real thing. You remember that?
Yeah. Right. Because the very first rumor about it was from a really, really dubious looking source.
Yeah, it was like this website that I never heard of, and it just came out with this thing like, Seth MacFarlane and Brannon Braga are developing the Books of Blood with Clive Barker. And we're like,
what?
Yeah. It's like the people who produced Cosmos, The Spacetime Odyssey, and Family Guy were going to work with Clive. But then, this just stayed up in the air, and we didn't hear much about it for a few months. And then on January of 2019, Clive talked about it again in a revelatory interview over at Phil and Sarah's Revelations website. And we knew for sure that this was happening. So now 2 years and change later, here it is.
One thing I've been seeing in a lot of the negative comments, and I feel like for some people, it might be an issue of managing expectations, right? Because, when we first heard about this, it was going to be an anthology TV series. And in my mind, the perfect Books of Blood TV series would start at the beginning and go through every single story. Some of them might take multiple episodes, and all the way to the end of volume 6, right? So that's but this is in the real world, they can't do that. I mean, there's rights issues and producers may not want, may have different ideas. And so I kind of just went in this going, okay, show me what you did. I'm not going to bring my own expectations into this. And I think for all that, I appreciated it more than if I'd gone in there going, man, this isn't what I wanted to see.
Right. So the Books of Blood, I mean, it's one of Clive's most profitable works after Hellraiser, I think. Over the years, we've seen stories get all these re-releases and standalone versions.
Yeah, it's what made Clive Barker famous before Hellraiser, yeah.
Of course, some of these ended up spawning movies like Lord of Illusions, Rawhead Rex, Candyman, Book of Blood from 2009, which I think needs to be mentioned.
Midnight Meat Train and Dread and...
Yeah. And even Mick Garris' adaptation of The Body Politic in Quicksilver Highway, and the Tales of the Dark Side adaptation of the Yattering and Jack.
Yeah, right? I was going to say the unforgettable Yattering and Jack.
We also had the Eclipse graphic novels that adapted a lot of the Books of Blood stories in comic form, and the Books of Blood stories that were adapted to comic book form either in the standalone graphic novels by Eclipse or in the Tapping the Vein series from Eclipse as well. Yeah. So there's been a lot of stuff coming out from the Books of Blood. And I think this show has been, the boon has been plentiful, so to speak, for Clive. In terms of licensing these things. There was even that Jacqueline S. project that didn't go anywhere yet.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that looked so promising.
And I think this Hulu movie is another, if I can use the metaphor, another finely applied spigot to the property. So I thought it was good. Even though most of the reviews have been very poor about this, I think people were expecting something different. Like you said, they need to manage their expectations. Judging from the articles that we've seen and talked over the last year, I think, people were expecting this to be somehow an anthology of known stories from the Books of Blood.
Yeah. And what it really is it's a weaving of 3 stories together. And one of them, like we said, is kind of a shortened version of the Book of Blood, just enough to be able to spin you into these other stories, right? Right. And then we've got the one with the character who has misophonia. That's Jenna, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And she goes into this kind of creepy bed and breakfast sort of a situation, and bad stuff happens there. And,
right.
And then there's another story, Bennett and Steve, and that's the one that kind of we didn't really understand from the previews and from all the news that we read and stuff. This Bennett and Steve story wasn't really talked about at all until we actually watched the movie. Then you kind of understand it better.
Yeah. So,
and to me, the Bennett and Steve, they're the two, like, I guess they're like loan shark killers kind of thing, gangsters. But to me, that particular part was kind of the weakest of the movie.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So the movie opens with Britt Robertson playing Jenna. She's a hypersensitive girl, suffers from misophonia, which is an abortive sound. And as she learns that her mother is about to send her back to the farm, she steals her money's cash and sets out for Los Angeles, right? So this is how the movie opens. Mm-hmm. And I thought that this story that opens and closes the movie by itself was good. I mean, it's not a Books of Blood story, but I thought that the story, was kind of shocking in the right spots. It had twists. It got me invested in it. It had brought some horrible visuals to the table and some horrible ideas.
Oh yeah, and it was just even they really do a good job of making you feel what she feels with people's like mouth noises, eating, and just this. It just is like, I'm with you. I hate that too.
It definitely surprised me in regards to the chances they took with the direction of the story and how they handled the characters. It had a kind of have you seen Get Out, the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, it had kind of a definite Get Out vibe.
Right, because it starts out sort of welcoming and stuff, but then it's more sinister, the more you, the farther you go.
you have this idyllic environment of kind of an Airbnb house run by Ellie, who's a former nurse with a green thumb for her garden, played by Freda Foshen, and her partner Sam, played by Nicholas Campbell. Without spoilers, man, that is a really that is a really messed up story.
It is, yeah.
But so that story is, like you said, truncated at the beginning. And then they kind of mix it in like a Pulp Fiction kind of thing, like Brannon Braga mentioned. So in one scene you see, and this is not a spoiler, you see Jenna walking out of a cafe and this sports car almost runs her over. That sports car is the other story.
Yeah.
It's Bennett and the other guy who are looking for a book, right? They're looking for rather they hear about a book that's worth millions.
Yeah.
And
it's called The Book of Blood, and that's all they know about it. It's like there's a book, and if you go to this address, was it 47 Tollington Place? Which you know was, if you go to this address, you'll get you can get this book, and it's worth millions. And so they're driving over and talking about, you know, what they're going to do with their money and get out of the life and stuff like that. And it does, you know, now that I've read these interviews, it does kind of bring to mind, you know, he is kind of modeling this after Pulp Fiction a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's even like during Jenna's story, you see that interconnect a little bit here and there with the Bennett story. And of course, this all comes from the idea that the Book of Blood is telling these stories through the skin of Simon McNeill, and that you know, everybody's story ends in the Book of Blood. The Book of Blood story itself, the adaptation of it with the scientist Mary Florescu, which in this story is Florensky.
Yeah, that was a change. I didn't really understand why that happened.
You know, that's not important, but it's not really a big deal. But it's very truncated, but it was very truncated in a very competent way. It really got the gist of the opening of the Books of Blood story. And of course, it went in different directions at some point. Sometimes I was like, oh, I don't think I like where this is going. Are they going to make him like a real psychic? And, you know. Oh, yeah, because the trailer, we all got fooled the way that Mary gets fooled. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And then there's a scene where Simon McNeill is talking about the dead. And I was like, oh, I don't like this part. This is not. And then the next scene, it actually redeemed itself. And I was like, oh, that's why I didn't like that, because they were going to, you know. So it surprised me. And I was like, oh, I like that. I like that twist that they did, and how we thought it was going to go a different way. And then, no, it's going this way. And it worked for me. It worked. Yeah. That part worked. And they made it so different from the Book of Blood movie, which I think they kind of had to, right? I mean, that movie's not that long ago. Actually, I thought that they called back a few things to the 2009 movie, like Mary Floresco's character, like being a caretaker of the Book of Blood and having gray hair and dressing like conservatively. That was just like the ending of the 2009 Book of Blood movie. No, that's true. Yeah. So that's not in the actual story in the Books of Blood. And, you know, does Mary Florescu die in the story? In the actual Book of Blood story? I forgot. I know the cameraman dies, who's there to record the paranormal stuff. Yeah, she doesn't die in the first story, and I can't remember if she dies in the postscript story. Well, anyway, regardless of that, she never becomes the caretaker of the Book of Blood. So that part kind of comes from the 2009 Book of Blood movie. Yeah. But in this one, they even take it a little further. She says she's the only reader. Or like she's the only one that, which makes sense, because when you look at it, you know, it's constantly updating and changing, and you would need someone to be the dedicated reader, because otherwise, you know, all you're looking at is just a mess. Sure. But I have to say, the weakest part of the movie to me was also the Bennett story. I mean, I think that part didn't have any sort of character development. Yeah. I don't know. It's a really reworked version of the postscript on Jerusalem Street, which closes the Books of Blood. Yeah, but it was just. I liked Wybird better as a villain, you know, for that story than Bennett. And definitely, and I guess we're not going to spoil what happens to them, but I didn't really feel a lot of suspense
or like I was afraid for them, because I didn't really care about those characters that much.
I felt that last part of the story may have been a little rushed. And this, we have to bring this up, that this was supposed to be an opening pilot for a TV show, right? It was going to be an anthology TV show. That's how they started announcing it. And then, halfway through it, it started saying, well, it's just going to be a movie. It's just going to be an anthology movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, I'm not sure how this jumped from the Hulu episodic show to an anthology movie. I'm not sure how much the production issues related to the pandemic ended up cutting this short and affecting the format. Yeah. So what do you think happened in terms of turning this? Do you think the pandemic might have had a hand in turning this into a movie from a TV show? Or
I don't know. That's a good question. Or maybe producers at Hulu had decided. But in the interviews that we saw, Brannon Braga had kind of said, and I don't know if this is kind of more producer speak, but it kind of said that it worked better as an anthology film, and that he was excited about making it like Pulp Fiction. So that's kind of been their official answer. But I don't know. Maybe they'd finished filming before we had issues of separation and the pandemic and stuff.
Yeah. So Clive Barker said in his revelatory interview back into 2019, he was talking about this when it was, I think, still in the show format. He says, as Brannon and I have been putting these stories together, it's been a great way for me to revisit in my imagination and share with him where the roots of these stories came from. And then, as you know, we've been doing this for many, many months now. As we've plunged into our memories, what that's thrown up for me is a real great body of new memories, if you can have a new memory. And from those memories have come stories. I tend to be, we've talked about this a little, if I have a memory which is very strong, a story will come from it incredibly quick, or not at all. And I always feel as though a narrative matrix is waiting in my head, or a series of narrative matrices are there in place, waiting for the appropriate narrative to slip into place. And when they slip into place with extraordinary speed. It happened 3 times this week for narratives which are going to go somewhere else that I can't talk about right now. So yeah, it seems like Brannon, Braga, and Clive were meeting one-on-one at least once a week for several weeks when they were developing this, according to what they said. And it feels like they were at that stage talking about more stories, not just these. They call them 3 stories, but it was really just 2.
I mean, I guess you could say that the Steve and Bennett part is another story. It's right. It's just not as well developed as the other 2.
Yeah, but it was interesting to read that Brannon Braga has been talking about the possibility of sequels. Maybe the reason why they turned this into a movie was that they wanted to sound the waters, and that right now a TV show is really expensive to produce, but like a 2-hour movie is something that you can just put out there and see how that does. And then if it does well, then you can do another 2-hour movie. Yeah. So
right, because you can't make a TV show 1 episode at a time,
Yeah, and with the whole binging thing on these platforms, people would just, the binging thing is fun, but it's not a positive way of properly digesting a show. I've always tried to, even when I have Netflix and Hulu, I've always tried to watch 1 episode a day at least, not try to just go. I'm not one of those guys who just, 12 episodes. I'm going to sit here on Saturday morning and watch all 12 episodes until night, and then I'm done with the show. Yeah. I don't think that's the proper way of digesting a show. So maybe there was that fear that maybe people would just binge on something. But
in the old days, though, you would watch a show and the episodes wouldn't really be that well connected. And some weeks they would do a rerun instead of a regular episode. And you kind of forget what happened on the previous ones. So I think your way is a little bit of a balance in between.
I guess so. But Brannon Braga spoke that he would like to adapt stories like In the Hills, the Cities, and how awesome would that be?
Yeah. That could be done now, right? I mean, he said, even in the interviews, he has said like the nearly unfilmable In the Hills, the Cities, which I think in the past was probably true, but we've seen even TV commercials with stuff that looks like In the Hills, the Cities. The massive giants made out of human bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, and wasn't there like a car?
It was a car commercial. I think.
Yeah, I forgot which one it was.
Yeah, yeah. They should do a Volkswagen Beetle commercial with that, and then you'd have almost the whole story.
Yep. So I thought that the story itself of Jenna was a great story by itself. That would have made a great episode just by itself. Even though the ending might be a little controversial for some people may not be too happy with how they, some of the twists and turns in the story. But I thought it went along perfectly with it. It's a tortured character. Yeah. Does not like the world she lives in. And I thought that she wants to find peace, and she finds peace in her own way. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm not going to say anything. But
as for the story of the Book of Blood and Bennett's story, that theoretically could have been also its own standalone episode.
Yeah.
It could have been an opening to the show. So I don't know if someone out there wants to take a crack at editing this 2-hour movie into 2 1-hour episodes of their own stories. Go right ahead. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Fan edits.
Yeah. Well, the Cabal Cut was a fan edit, technically. So, but
it had Clive Barker's input in it.
Yeah. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I got Hulu for this. I kind of enjoyed it. Like I said, it's a question of managing expectations for some people, because I think they're expecting to see the stories of the Books of Blood come to life.
Yeah. And
somehow that new story that was put in there, some people may be like, what is this? This is not the Books of Blood. I don't know what this is. This is different. I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, and if this gets people to subscribe to Hulu, I mean, it got me to. I don't know if I'm going to keep my subscription. I did the 30-day free trial to watch this, and I don't know if I'll keep my subscription. But however Hulu measures success, if this is successful, then maybe we will get some more, and maybe they'll even have money to develop ones that have rights with other studios. Like Midnight Meat Train with what is the name of that? Lionsgate, right?
Well, there's already a movie about that, so I'm okay with that movie. I don't see how they would, but yeah, I mean, why not? I just don't like the idea of several adaptations of the same thing, which when you look at it, there's been the 2009 movie, which was really, really faithful to the story.
Yeah.
So there's always that. That's not going away. Right. There was the motion comic version of the Book of Blood also.
Right.
Remember that?
And things can be done better. I mean, or more faithful.
Well, I would like to see the Rawhead Rex get definitely a remake treatment.
Yeah. And if it was a TV series, that might be more than one episode, because it's a big story.
I don't think they're going to go for the TV show anthology format anymore. But maybe they will do another anthology where they will get 2 shorter stories and put them together, and
it would be great.
That would be great. Yeah, it would be awesome. So we'll see what happens. I mean, in terms of success, I don't think critically this movie has been a little panned. I'm not sure why.
Well, it's back and forth. I think some of them, some there's been good reviews too, and some bad. I think that all the people who don't get to interview Clive have been panning it a little more.
Yeah, that's true. But it would be great to see them come back to this.
Yeah. The biggest critique I saw was that it was bland.
I don't think it was bland at all, especially not the Jenna story.
No, not at all. Yeah, I didn't.
That was
think
very
so either.
Horrific and surprising and shocking.
Maybe people expect it to be more transgressive, like Hellraiser style.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it just kind of breaks the stories a little bit, and the last third of it, the last part with Bennett, kind of like.
Yeah.
I wish that part would have been done a little differently. I don't know. But I really enjoy the Jenna story, and definitely they masterfully adapted the Book of Blood, the first story, and wow, I really wanted to see more of that.
One little aspect, and maybe I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but in the Bennett story, when they get to Tollington Place, it's like not only is that house a nexus of the dead, like a crossroads, but the entire neighborhood, right, is this haunted wasteland, And I thought, wow, that's a bold choice, right? I mean,
yeah,
to say that a place like that could exist in the world, and and people just whisper about you don't go there, that place is haunted.
Yeah, I didn't like that part because just a little bit down the street, it's like a bougie place with like bakeries and cafes and nice little houses. And then there's several square blocks of the city that are just like overturned cars and creepy like trees. And I'm like, this is strange. This is like a strange choice.
Yeah, the whole that whole section of the neighborhood's boarded up, and
I mean, I don't know about that part. That was part of the last story, which I wasn't too thrilled about. So I didn't really understand that choice. But, I mean, maybe that's a way of displaying the fact that we forget about the dead and we don't like to think about that part of, the scary part about the dead, that we don't like to think about that. Yeah. That we somehow push them out of the city, like Simon McNeill says, into the cemeteries. And that was an interesting part, right? I don't think that was as explored in the original story. This idea that we put our dead under the ground, far away from the city and outside of our city walls, but they still want to tell their stories. I think that part was kind of interesting that that we kind of shun them. That was a part when Simon McNeill was talking that I thought, I don't like this part. I don't like what he's saying. I don't think this is accurate. I don't think this makes sense. But then I understood that he's just a con man, so I thought, he was just making it up. But then at the same time, it turned out to be true. Well, I mean, if you want to put it that way. I mean, I'm not sure if that's... Well, the dead wanted to tell their stories for whatever reason. They did, but the whole thing about pushing them out of our lives and pushing them out of the cities, that's never in the original story. And I know now I'm being kind of a purist here. But the thing that causes this whole breakthrough of the dead stories to arise is that they have highways, right? It's that they have this world on top of our world where they're moving. And in places where their highways crisscross, metaphorically and literally, they become nexuses of activity. Yeah. And if you just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, that will overflow, and they will hold on to that piece of reality so they can, make themselves be known. I didn't go ahead. No, I just said, that the whole anthropological BS part that anthropological ghostly stuff that Simon McNeill was coming up with. I wasn't too happy with that. But, I mean, in the movie itself, they kind of seem like they did that with that wasteland neighborhood. So I'll give him that. Yeah. Well, it was interesting, too, because the neighborhood wasn't like that until the Simon McNeill event. Right? In the original story and in the 2009 movie, it was that this house is really, really haunted and it's a nexus of activity, and this is a good place for us to do our work or our experiment. Whereas in this movie, it's like Mary's house, and it's not necessarily haunted except for maybe her kid is hanging around. Yes. Yeah. But it's not, we're getting like into spoilery territory. It's not like a major crossroads. Yeah. Until the event. And the whole part about the sun that was created for this for this adaptation, because that's never a part of the original story. No, but there was something like that in the 2009 movie, wasn't there? It was like I think so, but it was like the wedge to make the story be quicker and have Mary Florensky believe a little faster, because it gave Simon McNeill a wedge to break her skepticism a little quicker. Yeah. Of course, in the original story, it is during her skeptical phase that they're doing trials and that they discover that this is true. So I thought that the purpose of the kid was just to make the story move a little faster, have Mary become a believer a little faster, and then give her more of a motive to be more emotionally invested in revenge against Simon McNeill. I liked the casting on almost the whole thing. Bennett and Steve, I don't know, but the rest of them I thought were great. Yeah, I really like the choices of Simon McNeill and Mary Florensky.
Yeah.
They were. Let's see.
And Jenna and the creepy people in the B&B were good.
Right.
Ellie and Sam.
Yep. Anna Friel played Mary. Rafi Gavron played Simon McNeil.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were really good. They were very, very good. So yeah, give it a try. Give it a try with an open mind. Not too open, or the dead will come and take over. But
right.
I thought it was cool. I thought it was all right. It's great to have Clive show up in these like mainstream platforms. And now that we have Nightbreed probably for sci-fi and Hellraiser being produced for HBO, I mean, it's great being a Clive Barker fan.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any final thoughts about the Books of Blood? That's going to be the other hard thing, is talking about those two movies.
Yes. It's like Halloween. You want to talk about Halloween from 1977? You want to talk about Halloween from 2014 or whatever? You want to talk about Halloween from 2019?
And it's just like, only one letter difference, right? It's like, no, I'm talking about Books of Blood, not Book of Blood.
Right, exactly. So anyway, I saw someone actually who said, hey, I just went on Hulu and I saw Book of Blood. It was really cool. And then someone was like, did you really watch the Books of Blood or Book of Blood from 2009?
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they linked the 2009 movie in their post.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so final thoughts. Yeah, I'm not regretting that I got Hulu. I'm happy that the movie is out. I'm glad to see that for once there was a project that was announced for Clive Barker, and a couple of years later, here it is, and we got to see it. And how cool is that?
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree.
Clive Barker's back on Twitter. Clive Barker's doing interviews for all these websites. Come on our show, Clive.
Yeah. You know what, though? I still want to buy it. I want to buy a Blu-ray and have it sit on my shelf and maybe someday get it autographed. You can't autograph a Hulu subscription.
That's true. That's very true.
I'm hoping that comes along.
It brings up a whole can of worms about physical media and streaming platforms that we could spend a whole hour just talking about that.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, what did you think? There was eye trauma in this movie too. What did you think about that?
Yeah. So I was really, really dreading that because of seeing the preview, and it was the whole time we're watching the Jenna story. I'm like, oh man, when is this going to come up? I don't want to see that. But then when you get to it, it's like, whew, okay, made it through that part.
You're not a Needles guy.
Yeah, no, but when that.
But you like Hellraiser.
Yeah, well, and watching it another time will be better. Yeah. It'll be easier. I felt a lot of kind of unease and suspense watching this movie. And that Jenna story really threw me for a loop in a lot of ways. I had no idea what was going on, and that was I was really pleasantly surprised in kind of a sick and twisted sort of way.
Cool. So check it out. It's there's going to be a Ask Me Anything with Clive Barker on Reddit. That's going to be 10/12. So that's 2 days from now. Yeah. It's probably going to be 1 day from when you're listening to this on Sunday.
Yeah. And I'll be at work, I think, when that's going on.
Yeah. So come up with your questions. Go to the subreddit rhorror. And look up for the Ask Me Anything by Clive Barker. I'll see if I can post links to that as soon as that stuff is going to be live.
Yeah.
And it's going to be great. Fans chatting with Clive Barker on the internet, asking questions. How awesome is this?
Yeah. Those kinds of things used to happen once in a while. Even wasn't there an AOL chat that he did one time? Yeah.
And Clive on IRC or ICQ.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Good times, man. They're coming back. So, and also follow Clive's Twitter at Real Clive Barker, because he's working on this again. He's posting stuff. He's talking about stuff, and he's actually been talking about the political climate that we're living in, right?
Yeah. It's nice to see him back on Twitter, it's good to see that this movie was kind of what pushed him back out onto social media, and maybe he'll stay.
Yeah, and of course, go to whatever bookstore you have. If you don't have the Books of Blood, find a copy of it, because now they're coming back and they even have the cover for the Hulu TV show, and there's a sticker on the cover that says now a TV show on Hulu or a movie on Hulu.
Yeah.
And get the Books of Blood. Read it. It's awesome. It's what got me in love with Clive Barker stuff. That was one of the first books that I bought, first series of books that I bought after I became a fan, after watching Hellraiser.
So just a quick teaser of things to come. I posted on Twitter and on Facebook a little teaser image that says it's a picture of my Amiga that says "Welcome to Sellworld" on it. So what that is, if you haven't figured it out, we're moving into our 8th fundraiser. So Clive Barker Podcast presents Fundraiser 8 Sellworld. And so that's what that is, and we've been working hard on it. That's what the video project I've been working on. That's been eating up all my hard drive space on my computer, and that'll be coming here really soon. I'm hoping to have the video ready and maybe get this thing posted by the beginning of next week.
Awesome. We've been working hard on that. We had some T-shirt designs, and we have more people helping out and sending us stuff. So that's really awesome. You guys will be sure to know when it's going to be live. We'll start teasing the Kickstarter soon.
Yeah, and coming next for podcast episodes, we have Kult Divinity Lost. We already put out there part 1. So if you want to see where the story is going, part 2 and part 3 will be coming soon. And then commentaries for G is for Grim Tales in our A to Z commentary series, Edward Scissorhands. And H is for Harlequinade with Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And then we have a Halloween surprise that we're putting together.
Spooky Halloween surprise.
Yeah.
Wonder what's going to be.
Yeah.
Is it going to be a special guest? Is it going to be something different? Who knows? You guys are going to have to stick with us to find out. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us on Spotify and all those podcatcher platforms that you guys like to get stuff while you're cutting carrots or doing your gardening or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, man, cutting carrots. I just saw Color Out of Space when the mother was cutting carrots and then she cut her fingers off. Have you seen that movie yet?
I haven't. It's got Nicolas Cage in it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to watch that. Isn't that directed by Richard Stanley?
Yeah. I bought him pizza one time.
Yeah, I remember that. I was there through Skype on your phone.
That's right. Yeah, and
That's cool.
the sound was so low that we couldn't hear you.
That's fine. All right, cool. So, and this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end.
You can find the show notes for this episode and join the discussion over at www.clivebarkercast.com. We've got an archive of past episodes, news, features, and reviews, along with all the ways you can connect with us. You can subscribe on every other place you can find podcasts. Share your thoughts with us and share our podcast with your friends. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and news blog that's not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.